Hey, what up? Welcome back to my channel where we code apps completely from scratch. In this one, I'm going to teach you how to build a full stack social media app like Instagram. Let me walk you through the app first. So starting with the authentication, the user can create an account and sign in, which brings us to the homepage with all the posts where you can of course like, as well as leave a comment. And we can go to the profile page where you got the profile picture as well as the bio. And I've also implemented a follow-unfollow system. And the main functionality here is to post an image. And you can also type a little caption. And of course you can delete it. Another cool feature is the search function, so you can look up all the users in the database. And currently we're in dark mode, but I'll also show you how to switch the theme to light mode. They both look pretty damn good in my opinion. And the great thing about Flutter is we can build this for mobile like iOS and Android, as well as the web. So I'll teach you how to make this app responsive to different screen sizes. And not only are we going to just build the app, but I'll also show you how to deploy it on the web so you can just share the link around and get people to use your app. Now, just before we dive into the code, I made a nice visual diagram for all the pages we're about to build. We're going to start off with the authentication. So if we're not logged in, then we'll go to the login page, which you can also go to the register page if you need to create an account. But once you're authenticated, we can go to the home page. And then in the home page, you can upload and see all the posts. And we can also visit the user profile of that post and see the person's followers. And back in the home page, we have a menu drawer, which allows us to go to our own profile. And then we have a search page. And then we have a settings page. And in the menu drawer, you can also log out, which brings us back to the beginning. So if you're ever lost, just look at this diagram. If you find my tutorials helpful and want to support my work, it would mean the world to me if you made a small donation or if you just buy me a coffee. I believe in free education, so all of my tutorials are free on YouTube and will always be free. But for me to continue making valuable content for you guys, every dollar goes a long way for me to continue creating. So if you have it in your heart, I really appreciate you. And let's now get into the tutorial. So I've opened up a brand new Flutter project and you should just get this demo counter app. And I'm going to delete everything below the main function so that we can start this from scratch. So let's create our material app. And I'm just going to give it a blank scaffold. So if you just save this, then you should just have a blank white app like this. And so this is where we'll begin. Now the first thing I'm going to do is in the library, let's create a new folder and I'm going to organize this project in terms of the features. So what I mean is the first feature I want to implement is the authentication. And so in the authentication folder, I'm going to create 3 folders called domain, data, and also a presentation folder. So these 3 layers will help us organize our code cleanly and maintain a good structure and architecture as we build this forward. So in this domain layer, we're going to put in everything that relates to the core logic of this app. And so in other words, it's the heart of your entire application. So starting with the domain layer, I want you to create another folder called entities. And so the first entity that we're going to create is an app user. So if we think about a user, let's give it 3 things. So the user ID, the email, and their name. And let's create the constructor to require these fields when we create this user. And I'm also going to have 2 methods here just to help us out. So the first one is converting this app user to a JSON format and vice versa. So if you don't know what a JSON format looks like, this is what it looks like. It's a map that has a field and each field has a value. And this kind of JSON is a very common format for storing data in databases like Firebase and stuff like that. So you should see this thing a lot. And the other method is to do the reverse. So let's say we have a user in terms of a JSON. and give it to our app user. Awesome. Now the next thing we need to do in the domain layer is to create a repository. So I'm going to call this the auth repo.dart. And so what we're going to do in here is the auth repository outlines the possible operations for this app. Okay, so for example, we want to have a method to log in with email and password. We of course want to register with email and password as well. But when we register, let's also just give it the name. And then I want to have a method to log out. And this one might be helpful as well, just a method to return the current user. The important thing about this auth repo is that we're just outlining what the possible methods are for this app. And we're not actually implementing the code yet. We're going to do that in the data layer. Okay, so this way we can separate the concerns out and make our code much more clean and modular. So now in the data folder, if you create a new file called Firebase auth repo, and we say implements auth repo, you can see that's what we're about to do now. So this implement keyword, we're going to implement this auth repository. And you can see it's got the red squiggle because it's saying that we need to implement this get current user, login, register, and all those methods that we defined here. So it's pretty cool because in this file, you can now just start typing login and it should just automatically come up with those methods. And then we have register, log out, and also fill out the get current user. So this is what we need to do. Just before we code up the Firebase part, let's come over to the Firebase console and let's create a new project. Cool, so we need to get started by adding Firebase to our app. And also in the build, I want you to go to the authentication. And let's click get started. And let's enable the email and password. And just while we're here, let's create a test user. Awesome. Now come back to our code and we're going to need to connect our Flutter project to our Firebase. So if you haven't done this before, then in the terminal, you're going to need to type npm install -g Firebase tools. But I've already done that, so make sure to do that. It should allow you to type in commands like this. So Firebase login. And you can see I'm already logged into my email. And then type Flutter pub global activate Flutterfire CLI. And that is going to allow us to use the Flutterfire command line interface. And we can now say Flutterfire configure. And it should just fetch all of your projects in your console. And you can see there's the one that I had, so social app tutorial. And for the platforms, I'm going to do Android, iOS, and web. And it's asking for the Android application ID. So you can put in whatever you want. You can see in the example, you can just say com.example.app. And usually it's just the reverse of your URL, like your domain website. So for me, it would be app.mitchcoco. The name of the app. But like I said, you can just use the example if you want. And while that is working in the terminal, I want you to come to the main.dart file and we're just going to do a little bit of setting up. So we have to make this main function an asynchronous. And we say widgets flutter binding ensure initialized. And you can see here, Firebase setup is done. And we have a new file that got generated, which you can see there it is. Sweet, so now we need to add in the Firebase dependencies. So let's say flutter pub add Firebase core. And hopefully the red squiggle should go away. And then now in our main function, let's go to the Firebase, and then initialize the app. And for the options, go to the default Firebase options in the current platform. Cool, and that is everything for the Firebase setup. So what I recommend at this point is to kill the app and restart it. And if it builds with no problem, then that means you've successfully connected it to Firebase. Cool, and my app is building with no issues, so everything is working fine. And so if you come back to our console and you just refresh the page, you can see now we have the 3 apps that are connected. So the Android, iOS, and the web. If you had any trouble up until this point, then just comment below, we can help you out. Sweet, so now let's fill out this bad boy. Open up your terminal and let's say Flutter pub add Firebase auth. And now let's handle the authentication. So at the top, let's just get an instance of Firebase auth. And let's start to fill out the login method. So I'm going to put this in a try catch, and we're going to attempt the sign in. So we're going to need to make this method an asynchronous so that we can await Firebase auth. And you can see in the methods here, sign in with email and password. Sweet. And then so once we've signed in, then let's create our user. And we're going to fill out those 3 fields, right? So we got the UID and then the email. And for the name, I'm just going to leave it as a blank name for now. Sweet, and at the end of this, you can see that we're returning the app user. So let's go ahead and do that. And if we have any errors, then let's throw the exception and just say login failed with whatever the error says. Cool, and for the register, it's going to be very similar to the login. So I'm just going to grab all this and copy it in here. But instead of signing in, we're going to sign up. And so when you go to the Firebase auth, instead of signing in, you can see the create user with email and password. And when we register, we're going to collect the user's name. So we can pass through the name field. And then moving on to the logout. This one's pretty easy, just say Firebase auth and sign out. And lastly, for getting the current user, let's get the person who's currently logged in Firebase. And let's just do some checks here. So I'm just going to check if no user is logged in, then just return null. Otherwise, the user exists, so we're going to return the app user with these details. Cool, so we've pretty much set up all the backend stuff. So now let's go to the front end, which is in our presentation layer. So now I'm going to create a new folder called qubits, as well as pages. And so for the state management for this app, I'm going to use BLoC, which I've made a beginner tutorial for if you want to check out more information about how to use BLoC. But I can show you here how to implement it in the social media app. So the first thing is in the qubits folder, I want to create another file called auth states. And so what we're trying to do here is to be able to manage the states. And so the different states that we can have in terms of authentication, we can have the initial, we can have loading, we can have authenticated, unauthenticated, and also any errors. Okay, so you can just say like class auth initial extends this auth state. And so using this, we can create all of these different possible states. And we can do some cool things like if it's the authenticated state, then we should be able to have the user that's logged in. We can have an unauthenticated state. and we can have a state that has errors, which can hold a message. So in the process of a user signing up and logging into your app, these are the different states during that process. And so we're going to bring this together by creating a new file called auth_qubit. And so this is the BLoC part of it. So open up your terminal. We're going to add another package, Flutter pub add flutter_BLoC. And by the way, I have been using BLoC over Provider, and I've been loving BLoC, to be honest. So let me show you here how it can be used and why it's so good. And so I want you to say class auth_qubit, and we're going to extend the qubit, which there it is. So enter, and then we're going to import the BLoC. And for each qubit, we have to specify the states. And so for us, it's going to be the auth state. And so let's grab our auth repository that we just created earlier and create the constructors. Cool, and one useful thing here is I'm just going to keep track of the current user. So let's create a bit of a plan here for what we're about to do in this qubit file. So we're going to firstly just check if the user is already authenticated. We want a way to get the current user. And then the most important stuff here is the login, register with email and password as well, and just log out. So let's start off with the checking the auth. Right, so what we can do is we can go to our auth repo and call that method that we created, the get current user. So if there is a user, then let's keep track of it in our current user variable. And also the most important part here is emitting the state, right? So we can emit and say it's authenticated and give the user through. Otherwise, we're going to emit the state of unauthenticated, right? So we're trying to have some good state management in this app. And let's just create a quick getter to get the current user. And now let's fill out the login method. So again, we're going to do a try and catch statement. And we're firstly just going to try the login. So let's firstly emit the fact that we're loading. And we're going to go to the auth repo and attempt this login with email and password. Again, if there is a user, then let's just keep track of that. And then we can emit the authenticated state. Otherwise, we are unauthenticated. And if there's an error in this whole process, then let's emit that error. Then that means we are unauthenticated. Awesome. Now let's do something similar to the register. So it's very similar. I'm just going to copy what we did in the login page, but just change this to be register. And finally, log out. We can just go to our auth repo and go to logout. And if that's all done, then we can say we are unauthenticated. And so just to sum up, the purpose of this qubit is to manage the different states. Well, here we're going to give the parameter for the name as well when we register. And you can see we're relying on this auth repository for all of the actual methods. Which are implemented in this data layer. So that's how everything is connected. And now finally, we can come to the pages folder and actually create the front end for this. So let's start off with a login page. On this page, an existing user can log in with their email and password. Once the user successfully logs in, they will be redirected to the home page. Also, if the user doesn't have an account yet, then they can go to the register page from here. to create one. So let's create this UI. Let's have a stateful widget with a scaffold. And I like to just put in a bunch of comments. And let's say the background color is red. Now, just to see what we are coding up in our main function, you can see we're just returning a blank scaffold. So now I want you to type in login page, and there it is. So that's our red. We can change it to blue. And one good practice is, instead of just hard coding the colors like this, I'm going to create a new folder called themes, and let's just create a light mode real quick. So you can choose your own colors, of course, or you can just copy the ones that I've selected, because these look pretty good. And so in the color scheme, the ones I like to specify is the surface, the primary, secondary, tertiary, inverse primary, and also a scaffold background color. So these are just different shades of gray that I like to use. And this scaffold background color is really useful because we can come to our main file, and for the theme, just give it our light mode. And if I come back to my login page, if I just get rid of this background color, by default, it should be whatever this is specified. So let's say gray with a shade of 900, it should be pretty dark. And there it is. So this way, all of your scaffolds will have the same color, and you can just control it here in a nice, easy place. So for the light mode though, I want to have a shade of 300. I like it kind of not completely white, but just kind of a slight gray is what I like. And now coming back to our login page, let's fill out the UI. So starting with the body, we're going to have a big column. And let's start off with a icon. There it is. Now it's kind of squished at the top, and so what you can do is wrap this in a safe area. And this will just avoid the kind of notch part. Cool, and then let's give it our color. So we can go to our theme and access the color scheme and give it the primary color. Again, this color is what we specified in this file. Let's center this. And so at the top, this icon, you can just put in any logo for your app, but I'm just gonna use this lock icon for now. And let's create a plan. So I wanna have a welcome back message. We wanna have a couple text fields for the email and password, and then the login button. And at the very bottom, if they're not a member, then we can create a button to go to the register now page. Sweet, so let's start filling this out. For the message, I'm gonna say, welcome back, you've been missed. And I feel like we could use some space in between. And let's give it a color. Maybe make it a bit bigger. And let's have another space, and we're gonna have a text field. So a text field, if you just type this in, if you just save this, you should be able to see this box where you can type stuff in. Now we're gonna probably reuse these text fields. So I'm going to create another folder called components, and let's create my text field. So if there's any UI components that you're gonna reuse, then it's a good idea to just separate it out. And so with any text field, I just want to know three things. The controller, so that we can access what the user typed, the hint text, and the obscure text. And I want to make it look a little pretty and nice. So in the decoration, I want to have two things. So the border when it's unselected and the border when it is selected. Okay, I'm just going to give it a color and a bit of a border radius. And let's copy this and give it for the focused border, but maybe let's just change the color. So if you come back to my login page and I say my text field, I can import that and we're going to fill this out. So that means I need to have a controller. So we need two. We need one for the email controller and the password controller. And for the hint text, just say email, and obscure text is false. So if I just save this, you can see there's our new text field. And if I click into it, and I can type stuff in. Sweet, and it's stuck to the side, so I feel like I could use some padding on the horizontal. Nice. And if I just copy this and do the same thing for the password text field, and I say obscure text is true, what the obscure text does is it just hides the information. So we obviously want to do that for the password. And just to finalize this decoration a bit, you can see we don't even see the hint text. So let's give it the hint text. It's a bit dark, so I'm just going to control the text style for that and just make it very light. Sweet, and finally I'm just going to give it the fill color, which is just the color inside. And that's looking pretty good. And so if I click into it, you can see the borders are changing, which is what I want to see. Awesome, and now it's time for the login button, which we're probably going to need to reuse again, so I'm going to create that in my components folder. I want to be able to tap on this button. So if you go to this gesture detector and you can hover over this on tap, it requires this sort of function. So I'm just going to grab that and I'm going to require it at the top. And I also just need to know the text for this button. Cool, now let's come back to our login page and import my button. And for the on tap, let's just execute nothing for now. And let's say login. Sweet, there it is, there's our button. I feel like we could do some colors. Nice, and maybe curve the corners. And I feel like we could give some padding on the inside. And that's looking pretty good. Let's just style up the text a little bit, make it bold and a little bigger. And that's looking good so far. Cool. And this column, by the way, everything is kind of stacking up at the top side. So I'm gonna main axis alignment to the center. And finally, just at the very bottom, let's have some text saying not a member, then register now. Sweet, so there's our login page. It's looking pretty good. Let's quickly create a register page, which is very similar to the login page. So I'm just going to grab everything inside here. And paste it in. And make sure to import these guys. And the difference, and in the main file, let's change this to register page so that we can actually see what we are coding up. And so for the register page, it's the same as the login page, but we just need some more controllers, right? I want to have a name controller and also the confirm password controller. Right, same thing with this welcome back message. Let's say like create an account message. Let's create an account for you. We got the email text field. I'm going to create another one so that we can grab the user's name. And also when they type the password in, I want to have another one to confirm the password. And the button is of course a register button. And the text at the bottom should say something like, already a member, then log in now. Awesome, so our login page and register page is looking pretty good. Wait, so now the problem is we can either display the register page or the login page, but how do I know which page to display? Well, that's why I'm going to create another file called auth page. And so for this one, I just want to have this to determine whether to show the login or register page. Okay, so initially, let's show the login page. And let's have a method just to toggle between the pages. And then in the build method, we can say if we're showing the login page, then show the login page. Otherwise, we're going to show the register page. So in the main.dart file, instead of just saying either login or register, we can just give the auth page. Which we set it so that it's going to show the login first, right? But if the user doesn't have an account, then I want them to click on this register now text at the bottom so that we can toggle the pages. At the very bottom, this bit of text, the register now, I want it to be tappable. So actually, let's separate this out in a row. I'm going to create this into 2 text widgets. And that second text widget, I'm just going to make the color a bit darker and make it bold so it looks like something that's tappable. And then we're going to wrap this in a gesture detector. And grab this onTap function and just require it at the top. And then we can give that onTap to this widget. Same thing for the register page. Now, instead of onTap, I actually feel like I should name it toggle pages, probably more accurate. And so let's grab what we just made in the login page and just switch this up for the register page. And yeah, let's change this naming to toggle pages instead of just onTap. Cool, so what we did is if you come back to our auth page, you should be able to see some red squiggles, and that's because we have to fill out this toggle pages method, right? So if I tap on that, then we can trigger this toggle pages method that we have here. Okay, so if I save this and I try it out, I'm in my login page obviously at the beginning, and then if I click on the text saying register now at the bottom, then we can switch between the 2 pages. Beautiful. So now on the login page, when the user fills out the email and password and they hit the login button, currently you can see we're not executing anything. So let's create our login method. So firstly, let's prepare the email and password by grabbing the text from those controllers. And then let's grab our auth qubit. And we're just going to do some checks here. So firstly, let's just make sure that the email and password fields are not empty. Then we can log in. And else, let's display an error. saying, please enter both email and password. Cool, so I want you to come back to our main.dart file and let's just clean up some of this code. So you see this my app. I'm going to just grab this and create a new file called app.dart, and I'm just going to separate it out. And so this will make our main file a lot cleaner. And it looks like we have a little error in the test, which we're not going to worry about testing for now. So I'm just going to comment this out. And so in the main function, we're running my app, which we have it in this separate file now. Because on this, we're going to do a lot of setting up. So this is the root level of our app. And so we need to do a few things here. We need to firstly initialize the repositories for the database. So this is for like Firebase stuff. And then we have the BLoC providers for state management purposes. And so currently we have the auth one that we're trying to do, but our plan for this app is also to do the profile, post, a searching function, and also a theme. And also this page is going to check the authentication state. So if we are unauthenticated, then let's go to the auth page, which is the login or register page. And if we are authenticated, then let's go straight to the home page. So this is what we are going to do. Firstly, let's get the auth repo from our Firebase that we just created. And we're going to return a BLoC provider. And in the create, we can pass through our auth qubit and just give it the auth repository. And also while we're here, let's just trigger the check auth method. So what we're doing here is we're providing the qubit to our app. And so you can see in the material app, we are currently just displaying the auth page. But what we're going to do now is return a BLoC consumer, which gives us access to a builder and also a listener. So now with a BLoC consumer, you need to provide the qubit. So for us, it's the auth qubit, and we are looking at the auth states. If you hover over this state, you can see that the type is those auth states that we defined earlier. So just so that the naming is consistent, I'm just going to change it to auth state. And we can do some cool things here. So if the auth state is unauthenticated, then let's return the auth page. So this is what we planned to do at the beginning. Right now, if we are authenticated, then we can return the homepage, which we haven't created, but we'll create that in just a second. And the other options are if it's loading, then we'll just give a circular progress indicator. It's just a loading circle. And it looks like we have some red squiggles in the main. Yep, let's get rid of this const. And I want to create a homepage, which is related to the posts, which is the next feature. So I want you to create a new folder called posts. And we'll have a presentation layer to store the pages, which holds our homepage. Cool, so just real quick, I'm just going to create a stateful widget and a blank scaffold. And let's just give it a app bar. Sweet, so now we can import the homepage and let's try to see if this works. At the top here, I'm actually also going to print the auth state so we can keep track of that. And since we brought in a new package like Firebase auth, it's always a good idea to just kill the app and restart it. There it is. Now we created a test user in the console. So let's try that out. So test@gmail.com with the password. And you can see if I click login, then there's the loading circle, and now we are in the home page. And if you open up your debug console, you can see the auth states. So it's auth initial, and then it's authenticated. Right, so that's what this check auth is doing. If you come back to our auth qubit, right, we're checking the auth to see if the user is authenticated or not, and we are emitting these states. And so this is how we do state management. Awesome, which brings us to the next part, which is the logout button. So I'm going to put that in the actions. And let's go to our auth qubit and just log out and see if this works. And now we are logged out, and you can see that in the debug console, it's unauthenticated. So this is working very good. So managing your states like this makes it so much easier and clearer to understand what's happening, especially in a complex app like a social media app that we're currently building. So you got these different states. We also had this auth error state, which let's try to implement. So firstly, let's do some error handling. Like if I have an empty field, you can see it's telling us to enter both email and password. And if I enter something incorrect, yep, it's not letting me log in, but I want to display the error. So if you come back to our BLoC consumer, you can see in the listener, let's say if the state is auth error, then let's just print what that message is. So if I save this and then I do some random input, you can see it's printing out what the error is. So the email address is badly formatted. Nice. So this listener will listen for any errors that we have while we log in. Awesome. So logout is done. Now we have to do the register. So in our register button, let's create the register method. And so we're going to do some similar things that we did in the login. So firstly, we just need to prepare the information. We need to get the auth qubit. And just do some checks and make sure that the fields aren't empty. If they are empty, then let's display an error. But if it's all good, then let's also make sure that the passwords match, like the password and the confirm password, before we do anything. Okay, so if all of these conditions are good, then we can go to our auth qubit and just register this user. And dispose of our controllers at the end. Beautiful. Let's save this and restart it, and I'm going to try the register. So Mitch Coco, I'm going to give it an email and some password, and I can register and go in. Beautiful. It is now time for our Firestore database. So if you come back to our console, I want you to go to the Firestore database and let's create the database. You can select what region you want, but I'm just going to leave it as US. And let's create our database. Now let's go to the rules, and I want you to just change this to true so that our app can write information to the database. And now let's come back to our code and let's bring in this package. So I want you to type in your terminal, Flutter pub add cloud firestore. And so once you've got that, what I want to do is when we register a new user, after we attempt the sign up and then we create the user, I want to also save the user data in Firestore. Okay, so at the top, we can now say Firebase Firestore, which is the package we just brought in. And so let's go to the Firestore, and I'm going to put them under the collection called users. And so under this user ID, let's set the information as a JSON format. So let's test this out. Now, since we brought in a new package, let's kill the app and just restart it. And let's go to the register page and create a new user. So Steve Jobs, just give an email and a password. And we have registered. So now let's come back to our console. And if I refresh this page, hopefully in the database, we have the users. Awesome. So there's our collection of users. You got the user ID, and then we're storing their info here. Sweet. So that's going to be very useful for us in order to create our profile page, which is what we're going to do now. And by the way, let's just clean up some of this folder structure. So you see, I'm going to create a new folder called config. And in this folder, I'm just going to drag in that Firebase options file. Awesome. So now let's build out our homepage. So currently we've got the scaffold and an app bar. I want to now create a drawer. And if you just save this, you can see that little menu icon and it's going to open up a blank drawer. Now, just to keep our code nice and organized, instead of just coding it here, I'm going to create a new folder in our presentation layer called components. And so I like to put the different widget UI components here. So we can give it a background color. And let's just have a big column with some sort of a logo. Let's just put in an icon for now. And then we can come back to our drawer and say my drawer, and there it is. We can hit enter to import. Looks good. So our icon is there, but it's kind of covered by the notch area. So you can wrap this widget in a safe area, which will just avoid the top bar. And let's start decorating this out. So I'm just going to give it a color. And we're going to have a few different tiles. So we want a home tile, a profile tile, search tile, settings tile, and at the end we want a logout tile. Similar to what we did for the drawer, I'm going to just separate this in the components folder to create my drawer tile because I want to reuse this multiple times. So if I think about a drawer tile, I just want three things. I want the title, I want the icon, and also the on tap. So let's require these and pass them down to our list tile. And if I come back to over here, we can import my drawer tile and start filling this information out. So home, give it a home icon. And for now, let's just execute nothing on the on tap. And if you save it, there it is. So if you want to make any changes to this, we can just come to our My Drawer tile. Like for example, we can just decorate it up all here. So I'm just going to switch up all the colors a little bit. And it's stuck to the side, so this overall column, let's put in a horizontal padding. And just space this out appropriately. I like to have a divider line here, which is pretty cool. And so now we can create multiple tiles. Sweet. And for the logout tile, I actually want that at the very bottom. So what you can do is just use a spacer icon in between, and that'll just expand it. Awesome. So now the UI is done. Let's actually fill out these on tap methods. So if you tap on the home, then we are already at home. So let's just pop the current screen. And if I click on the profile tile, we want to pop the screen, of course, but then I also want to navigate to the profile page. Which we haven't created yet. And by the way, we currently put all of this stuff in the post folder. I'm actually just going to rename that to home. I feel like that's more appropriate for now. And let's create one more folder for profile. And so we're going to have those three layers again, the domain, data, and presentation layer. And so in the presentation layer, we can create the pages and create our profile page. Beautiful. So I'm just going to create a stateful widget with a blank scaffold. And let's come back over here and import my profile page. Sweet. So let's test this out. If I save this and open my drawer, I can go to my profile page. Nice. And while we're at the drawer, the other thing is our logout button. Currently, we've just got it on the app bar, right? This bit of code here is going to be the logout. So I'm going to just get rid of the app bar actions. And instead, I'm going to just put it onto our logout tile down here. Beautiful. So now we can just fill out our profile page. So let's start with our qubits. I'm just going to grab the auth qubit. And let's grab our current user. And maybe let's display the current user's email in the app bar. Nice, there it is. So you can see that currently we are stevejobs@gmail.com. Now, if you think about our users, if you go to our auth in the domain and you look at our app user, it's got these three fields, right? User ID, name, and the email. But for a profile, I want to have more information, like the profile picture as well as the bio and things like that. So in my profile, in the domain folder, I'm going to create a new entity called profile user. And this profile user is just an extension off of the app user that we had initially. But on top of that, I just want to have the bio as well as the profile image. So you can see in the constructors here, required, we can go to the superclass, which is our app user, and have the UID, the email, and the name, just like normal. But we can now have a couple more bit of information like the bio and the profile image. And let's just create a method to be able to update this user. So just a copy with is a very common way to do this. And similarly, what we did to the app user, I'm just going to have a couple methods down here to convert the formatting. So converting our profile user to a JSON and vice versa. Now, when it comes to the profile image and the bio, it will be null in our Firestore because we didn't ask for it when they sign up. So we're going to just do a quick null check and return a blank string if nothing exists. Just comment below if you have any questions about what we're doing. I can help you out if you need. Awesome. Now let's create our profile repository. And so here, remember, we're going to define the different operations that we can do for the profile. So for example, I want to be able to fetch the user profile with a given UID. I want to be able to update the profile, right? Like if they have a new bio or profile picture. And that's actually pretty much it for the two profile functions, which means we can go to our data layer and create our Firebase profile repository. And so we're going to implement that profile repository for our Firebase. So we had the fetch user profile. You can see it's showing up there. And the other one is updating a profile. So we're going to fill out these two methods. So starting with the fetching the user profile, we're going to put this in a try catch. And let's get the user document from Firestore. Right, so we put them under the collection called users, go to the specific document with that user ID, and just do some checks here. So just make sure it actually exists. If we actually have the user data, then we can return a profile user with the appropriate information. Cool, otherwise just return null for now. And in our updating profile method, we're going to convert the updated profile to a JSON format so that we can store it in Firebase. Okay, so just go to the collection of users, find the user ID, and we're just going to update these fields. Beautiful. And then finally, we can bring this together by creating our qubit. So our profile qubit. And we also need the profile states. So we have the initial state, we got the loading, we got the loaded, and also any errors. Cool, so let's create our profile qubit. We can extend the qubit, and we have to give it the profile state. So firstly, let's require the profile repo. And so we want to be able to fetch the user profile using the repo. And we also want to update the bio or profile picture. So let's just start with the fetch user profile. Again, the main purpose of this qubit file is for the state management part. So when I open this try catch statement, firstly, I'm just going to emit the state of profile loading. And then we're going to go to our profile repo to try to fetch our user profile. And if we are able to do that, then we can say emit profile loaded. Which, by the way, if I come back to the states, if we have a profile that's loaded, then we should be able to store that here. Same thing with the error, if we have some sort of message. Right, so what we just did is coming back to our qubit, if we have a user, then we can emit the state that is profile loaded, and we can pass through whatever that loaded user is. Okay, otherwise that means we have some error, just say user not found. And same thing for down here. Cool, and then let's fill out the qubit for the updating profile. I want to require the UID so that we know what user we're updating. And let's just, for now, update the new bio. So firstly, we're going to emit the state that the profile is loading currently. And we're going to try to update the profile. So firstly, let's get the current user. And if the user doesn't exist, just emit an error. Then try to do the profile picture update, which we'll do in a second. And then we can create this updated profile with this new bit of information. Sweet, and then finally we can update it in our profile repo. And once that's all done, let's just refetch the updated profile. So coming back to our profile page, we've got this app bar currently displaying the email. Let's just give it a color. And so what I'm going to do is I want to make this profile page so that it's not just for the current user that's logged in, but also when you want to visit other people's profiles, which means at the top, I'm going to need to just require one thing, which is the user ID. And so you can see there's a little red squiggle in my drawer because we are going to the profile page, but we need to give it the user ID. Right, so if I just add some comments here, this first thing is just popping the menu drawer, and then we are navigating to the profile page. But just before that, we need to get the current user's ID. And to do that, we can just access the auth qubit. and get the current user. Then from there, we can grab the user ID. Okay, so if I just save this, I can go to the profile page and everything's working smoothly. And so now let's create our profile Cupid. And on startup, so in the initial state, I want to load the user profile. And so if that's loaded, then if I come back to my build method down here, I'm going to use a BLoC builder, which will give our profile Cupid and our profile state. And in the builder, let's go through the different states. So we have the situation when it's loaded and also if it's loading. Those are the two main situations. So if the state is profile loaded, then return the scaffold. And else if it's loading, then just return a circular progress indicator. Cool, and then just do a big else to catch the rest. Okay, awesome. And then to bring this all together, if I come back to my app.dart file, you can see that we have a BLoC provider providing the auth qubit. But now we need multiple qubits. So I'm going to use a multi-BLoC provider. Okay, and so the child, we can just give our material app. And then here in the providers, we can give multiple providers. So the first one is a auth qubit. And then now we can provide our profile qubit. Now we can provide our profile qubit, which requires that repository. So let's actually create that Firebase repository at the top. And so our BLoC provider is set up nicely. Now coming back to our profile page, so if the state is loaded, then let's get the loaded user. And we can give the user's email into this app bar or the user's name. Let's see if this works. No profile found. Oh, in our repository, when we fetch the user profile, for the buyer, it could be null, so just give it a blank string if it is. And we can go to our profile page. Nice. So now we can go to our body and we can create a big column. And so we can have, let's say, email at the beginning, user email. Let's see if that pops up. Nice. And now we can just decorate it. And then we got the profile picture underneath. And for the buyer box, let's do this in a new component folder. And all we need for the buyer box is just some text. And we'll make this look nice. Cool, so let's import the buyer box and just give it the user's buyer, which currently it's empty. Cool, I'm just going to clean up the way some of these widgets are working. I want this buyer box to be extended to fill up the screen. I'm going to put in a double dot infinity to fill out the width. And I'm going to do the same thing for the posts. Cool. Now in the app bar, I want to have a button to be able to edit the profile. So you can see that little gear icon at the top right. If we click on this, then I want to go to a new page. Let's call it edit profile page. And let's just create that now. So let's come back and import what we just created. And so if I click on that little settings icon at the top, I can go to this new page. And so on this page, let's just accept a user. And on this page, let's start off by trying to update the bio. So I'm going to create a bio text controller. And let's build out the UI. So I'm going to have a BLoC consumer. And go to our profile states, and we have, say, profile loading, profile error, and then if it's loaded, then let's build the edit page. So this edit page is just going to be a scaffold. And in the body, I'm going to have a column with the profile picture and then the bio. Let's bring in my text field from earlier. And you can see if I save this and I go to my edit profile page, I can now type stuff in here. So let's finish building this out. If the state is loading, then just show a circular progress indicator. And just to keep it simple, just else. If it's not loading, then let's just return the edit page. Cool, and also in the listener, what we can do is if the state is loaded, just pop the current page and we'll return to the previous page. Right, so if you save this and I rerun this, if you go to our profile page and go to the settings icon, and you can see it's got that preloaded bio there. So let's add in a new updated bio and hit save, and you can see it's loading, and then it will go back once it's all done. Perfect. Now it's time for the profile picture. So let's come back to our console, and we're going to need to enable the storage to be able to upload files. So let's click get started, hit next, and click done. And just real quick in the rules again, I'm just going to change this to true so that we can write and save data here. And then coming back to our code, let's create a new feature. So a new file here called storage. And so for this, I'm going to have a domain layer and a data layer. So let's start with the domain layer. We're going to create the storage repo. And so what we're going to do here is we want to upload profile image on mobile platforms and also on web platforms. So it's going to require two slightly different ways of doing this. If we're on a mobile platform, then we just need the path, which is a string. But if we are uploading on a web platform, we need this file bytes. Cool, and then let's implement this in our data layer by creating a new file called Firebase storage repo. And then we can implement the storage repo. And so you can see it's got a red squiggle because we have to implement those two methods. So if you start typing upload, you can see it's just showing up already. And we just need to fill this out. So open up your terminal and let's add in this package. So Flutter pub add Firebase storage. So we can grab that at the top. Just to help us do this, I'm going to create some helper methods to upload files to the storage and make our code a little cleaner. For mobile platforms, we're uploading a file. And for web platforms, we're uploading bytes. So in the instance of uploading a file, we just need to create that file using the path. And in the storage reference, we can store it in wherever we want, but I'm going to just put it in this folder and under the file name. And then let's upload. Cool, and when it's successfully uploaded, it will come back with a download URL, which we can return. And just catch any errors. So similarly, I'm going to do it for the web platforms, but this one, we just need to do it for the bytes instead of the path. So it's very similar, so I'm just going to copy what we had before. We don't need the files. So now we can come back up here and say, let's return, call that upload file method. We are placing it in the folder called profile images. Okay, if it's for web, then let's upload with the file bytes. So to bring this back together, I want you to come to the profile qubit. And let's grab that storage repo and require it. Which means you can see in the app.dart there's a squiggle because we need to require that storage repo. So let's create that Firebase storage repo at the top. And I'm actually going to rename all this to say Firebase auth repo, Firebase profile repo, and Firebase storage repo, just to make the namings consistent. Sweet. And so if you come back to our profile qubit, we have this method to update the profile. And so we are already able to update the bio. So now let's try to update the profile picture. So in these parameters, I'm going to be able to accept either the bytes for the web or the path for the mobile. And you can see I've got it with the question mark, meaning it could be null. So depending on what we're given. So if this method is called, then we can try to get the current profile. And then now let's update the profile picture. Right, so firstly, we just need to ensure that there is an image, whether that's from the web or for the path. Then go to the storage repo and say upload profile image mobile and give it the appropriate information. Else it's for the web. Then let's go to the storage repo and call the upload profile image web method. Okay, and at the end of all this, if we don't have an image download URL, then we can just emit an error and say failed to upload image. Sweet, if that's all good, then we can update the new profile with this new image download URL. And that's looking really good. So if I come back to my edit profile page, just to sort out the UI part, we need to have an image picker. So I'm going to open up the terminal and I want you to type in Flutter pub add file picker. So once you got that, then we can say the mobile picked image as well as the web picked image. And now let's have a method to pick the image. So we're going to go to our file picker. Right, so when we do the file picker, we can pick the file of type that is images. And one really useful thing we can do is at the top, if you just import the foundation.dart as k is web, what this is it will show you if this current platform that the app is running on, if it's web or not. And then just pass through this is web variable. Okay, if you hover over it, you can see it's false by default. And then if we have a result, Then we can set state and update this image picked file. Okay, if it's web, then just get the bytes. And then in our update profile method, we are currently able to update the bio. So let's now prepare the images. So firstly, grab the user ID and just prepare the images here. So just depending on if we are looking at web or mobile is what I'm doing. Cool, and while we're here, let's also clean up the code for the bio part. And so now in the check, just make sure at least one of them we have something new. So only update profile if there is something to update. And then we can pass through all the information to our profile qubit to update the profile. Beautiful. Cool, and then at the end of this, just do a quick else and pop this page. And so this means like nothing to update. So we'll just go to the previous page. Cool, and just to finish off the UI part of this, when we build this edit page, I don't think we really need this upload progress. Let's now fill out this profile picture. So again, I'm just going to put in a placeholder icon for now, kind of like a circle of some sort. And for the child of this container, we're going to have three options. So display the selected image for mobile, display selected image for web, and the last case is when there's no image selected. Then we're just going to display the existing profile picture. Okay, so make sure it's mobile and that there is an image that is chosen. Then we're going to return that image file. So that's for mobile. Now, if it is web and we have a web image, then return that image. And then finally, we have the situation where no image has been picked. So we're just going to display the existing profile picture. And one really useful widget for this is a cached network image. So I want you to open up your terminal and type in Flutter pub add cached network image. And so what this does is you can see we can give it the image URL. And this is just useful for things like loading the image and also caching it. So caching means like it's saving it on the local storage so that we don't have to refetch it every single time. And in this cached network image, we have some nice options to play around with. So we've got the image URL and the image builder. So this is when it's loaded. What if it's loading? Then we can give it a placeholder. So maybe just like a circular loading circle. And also an error. Okay, if we are not able to load the image, then just display like a person icon. Okay, and then finally at the bottom below this, I'm just going to have a pick image button. And since we brought in some new packages, I'm just going to kill the app and restart it. Sweet. Okay, so rebuild the app and let's go to our profile page. Let's go to the edit page and click the pick image, and you can see, yeah, we are able to access all the photos. So if I select a photo, then yeah, you can see it's sitting there now. So we can pick the image. So now we just need to decorate this a bit. Like if we come to this container in the profile picture, you want to say clip behavior. You want to say clip hard edge. So that will just go inside the circle. And I also want to fill it. Then what we can do is in each of these images, you can see the fit, and we can say boxfit.cover. And that will just fill it up. And that's looking really good. So let's give it a new bio as well and hit save. And then we got that loading screen. And now we are back to our profile page. So it looks like the bio is updating like normal. And I'm pretty sure the image is also being saved in Firebase. Let's just come to our console to see if our images are getting uploaded. So if I refresh this page, you can see there's our folder of profile images. And there's the image. So clearly it's in Firebase. And the other thing is, if you go to the Firestore database, under each user, we have all the user information, including the profile image URL. So that's the download URL that I'm talking about. Which means what we need to do is we need to be able to display this image from Firebase into our app, right? So we've pretty much done that with this cached network image. So let's just copy this and come to our profile page. And I'm just going to replace that profile picture. And there we go. There it is. Looking good. And so from here, you can decorate it however you want. Smaller. We need to make this more of like a circle. Nice, and that's working pretty good. If I have a new image, then my new image is getting uploaded. This is so cool. So now that we've done the profile, now it's time for the main part of this app, which is posting an image. So let's create a new folder in the features called post. And we're going to have those three layers. So domain, data, and presentation layer. Let's start off with the domain layer. We're going to create our entity called post. And so every post, we want to have the ID, the user ID of this post, the username, text, image URL, as well as the timestamp. So let's just go ahead and require these guys. And it's always useful to have this copy with method if we ever need to change anything in this post. Specifically, the part I want to change is the image. And like we did before, let's have those two methods to convert the post object to a JSON file so that we can store in Firebase, and the reverse. So from Firebase will return us a JSON file, and then we can return that as a post object to use in our app. Now, one thing to note here, you can see that if you hover over this particular value is a datetime. So I'm going to need to convert this to a datetime object. The typo in our post entity for the user ID, the JSON also should be user ID. So that's our post. Now it's time for our repository. So again, the repository is to outline what are the possible operations regarding posts. So for example, we want to fetch all posts. We want to create a post. We want to delete a post. And we also want to fetch posts by user ID. So what that means is fetching posts for a specific user. And then in the data layer, we can create our Firebase repository. To implement this post repo that we are outlining here. Right, so these 4 methods, let's start to implement them. You can see if you hover over this, it's got the red squiggle because it's asking us to implement those methods. So if you just start typing create post, there it is. So we have create post, we have delete post, fetch all posts, and fetch all posts by user ID. Cool, so let's grab our Firestore at the top. And we're going to store the posts in a collection called posts. So let's start with the first method here. We're going to do a try catch. And we will attempt to go to our post collection under this specific post ID. And we're going to set and save this new bit of data. So whatever the post is, we can convert it to the JSON format and save it. Same thing for deleting a post, is quite easy. As long as we know the post ID, we can go through the collection and just delete that post. Moving on to fetching all posts. This one's quite easy as well, so we just want to go to the post collection and maybe we can order the timestamp field and say descending is true. And so what that means is I just want to have the most recent posts at the top. And then let's convert each Firestore document from this JSON to a list of posts. And if we have any errors, just throw the exception. Cool, and while we're here, let's do the fetch post by user ID. Again, very similar, just go to the collections. For this one, we're going to look at the user ID field and just make sure it's equal to our user ID. And then we can convert these Firestore documents from JSON to a list of posts. And if we have any errors, just throw the exception. That's it. We've implemented these 4 important methods. If you have any questions about what we did, just post a comment below and I'll help you out. And finally, we can go to our presentation layer and create our qubits. So firstly, I want to have the post states. So the different type of states that we're going to have. Right, we have the initial state. We've got the loading state. We have the uploading state. Any errors. And finally, the loaded state. Right, and if it's loaded, then we should have all the posts there. Sweet, and now we can create our post qubit. Which I'm going to require the post repo and also the storage repo. And let's start off with the first method to create the post. And remember, everything in this post qubit is related to state management. So when we create this post in the parameter, you can see I'm accepting a post. And also I'm optionally accepting an image from either the path or the bytes, right? Just depending on if it's from mobile or web. So handle image upload for mobile platforms using file path. And handle image upload for web using file bytes. Right, so let's say it's the mobile, right? Then we can emit the state of uploading and go to our storage repo and try to upload this image. And similar thing for the web. And then finally, we can give the image URL to our post. So with this existing post, just copy the same one, but we can give it the image URL. And then create this post in the backend by going to our post repository. Sweet. Now I'll actually want to get all this and put it in a try catch, just so that we can throw an exception and catch any errors. Sweet, and then let's move on to the next method to fetch all posts. Again, in the try, let's emit the state of it's loading. And then we're going to go to our post repository to fetch all the posts. Once that's done, we can emit the state of posts are loaded and load up those posts. Cool. And if we have an error, then just emit the state of post error. Which means we should actually do that for up here. Instead of throwing an exception, which is fine, I actually just want to emit the error. Nice. Sweet, and let's do the similar thing for deleting. And that is pretty much it for the qubit. Now let's come to the actual UI, which is in our home page. In the app bar, in the action, so on the top right corner, I want to have a new button to post. Right, let's just have a add plus icon. And so if I click on that icon at the top right, then let's go to a new page called Upload Post Page. Which we haven't created, so let's just create that now. And then we can import what we just created. And so if I save this and I click on the plus, then we are in this new page. So this one's going to be very similar to the edit profile page that we had earlier. We just want to get the mobile image pic, the web image pic, a text controller for the caption, and then let's build out our UI. And since anytime someone uploads a new image, it's just going to be from the current user. So let's keep track of the current user. By going to our auth qubit, and then we want to select the image. Now, like I said, it's so similar to the edit profile page. So if we just go to that, let's grab that pick image method. Right, we're going to do that foundation and see if this is web or not. And then once we've got the file picked, then we want to create and upload the post. So I'm just going to do a quick check and make sure that both the image and caption are provided. And if that's all good, then we can create our new post object. Now for the ID of the post, an easy way to do this is to just get the date time of right now. And you can see the milliseconds since epoch. So this will just be an integer. And so every post will have a new unique ID. And let's go ahead and just give the user ID, the username, the text. And for the image URL, it's just going to be blank for now. And let's make sure to try to upload using our post qubit. Right, so if it's the web upload, then I want to go to the post qubit. We want to create the post. And you can see here in the parameters, we are providing the post. And optionally, we are providing the image path or the image bytes. Right, so I'm going to say this is the web upload. So I'm going to provide the image bytes. Otherwise, if it's the mobile upload, then just do the mobile version. Sweet. And let's just dispose of our controllers like normal. And now let's build out the UI. So I'm going to create a BLoC consumer, which is basically it's got a builder and a listener. We are currently looking at the post qubit and the post states. So if you hover over this, you can see the state is either all of these. So initial, loading, uploading, error, or loaded. So if it's loading or uploading, then I'm just going to have a loading circle. And otherwise, let's just return the upload page. And so in the upload page, we're just going to have a scaffold, an app bar, and in the body, we're going to have a big column. And just show a preview for the images, whether that's for web or for the mobile. And then we need that button to be able to pick an image. And then we need that caption text box. Sweet, it's looking good. And then finally in the listener, we want to go to the previous page when the upload is done and the posts are loaded. So we did something similar before. So if everything is uploaded and then it's loaded, then just pop it and go to the previous page. And so if I save this, you can see we have an error, and that's because we have a new qubit and we need to provide it. So let's come to the app and get our post repository, the Firebase that we created. So now we have the auth qubit, the profile qubit, we got the post qubit now. So if I save this and I restart it, you can click the plus button. We are now trying to create the post. Let's pick an image, pick anything. And there's the preview of the image. And then we can bring in a caption, which brings us to finally at the top app bar, we need a button to be able to actually upload, right? So go to the app bar in the actions and create an icon button. And so if I click that, then nice, it's uploading. And it looks like the loading circle is stuck. And this is why if I open up my debug console, looking at all of these states will be helpful for us to fix what's going on. So it looks like it's currently uploading, right? So when I create the post, we are uploading. And it looks like we never emitted a different state after that. So after all this, let's just refetch all posts. So let's try this one more time. I'm going to select an image and then have a caption and then hit save. And sweet. So it looks like we're not stuck on the loading anymore and we are back on the home page, which you can see in our debug console as well. Posts are loaded, which is good news. You can see here, like I printed the state just to see what is going on. And this type of state management using BLoC makes it so much easier for us to fix any mistakes. So you can see if you come back to our storage and I refresh this, yep, there is a new photo there. So that is the one that we uploaded. One thing, by the way, is looks like we are storing it in a folder called profile images because we were doing the profile stuff earlier. So if I come back to my storage repo, yeah, we got these profile image uploads. And so I'm just going to have a similar one for post image uploads. Okay, so this first section is for profiles. And then let's have one for posts. And it's very similar. In fact, it's the exact same. We're going to use, but the folder name I'm just going to change. So instead of profile images, let's say post images. And same thing for the web version. Post images. So come back to the post qubit. When we go to the storage repo, when we're creating a post, use the upload post image version. Cool. So if I just save this and I try the whole upload again, in my Firebase storage, yep, we have it in the appropriate folder now. Sweet. And then also while we're here, if you go to the Firestore database, you can see we've got a new collection called posts. And so each post, you got all the information there, except for some reason the name is blank. I wonder what's going on there. And so let's have a look at what's going on. In our Firebase auth repo, yeah, you can see we didn't give it a name because when we first created this at the beginning, the app user, we only had the user ID and the email. So now that we have the profile information for a user, let's fetch the user document from Firestore. Right, we're going to go to the collection of users and go to this specific user ID. And we should be able to grab the name from Firebase. So that's for the login. When they register, they already have a name, so we don't need to worry about that. And then when we get the current user here as well, we need to do the similar thing. Awesome. So now it looks like everything's working and we are able to upload the post to Firebase. Let's now come to our homepage and try to display all the posts in our app. So let's grab the post qubit at the top. And then on the startup, so in the initial state, let's just fetch all the posts. And also just a quick method for when the user wants to delete the post. So let's come back down to our scaffold, and in the build, in the body, we're going to have a block builder. And we've got these three states, right? So loading, loaded, and error. If it's loading, we're going to return a circular loading circle. If it's loaded, then we should be able to get all posts from that state. Okay, if it happens to be empty, then we'll just say there are no posts available. Otherwise, we're going to use a list view builder. Right, item count is just all post.length. And when we build this, we want to firstly get the individual post from the big list. And for now, I'm just going to return the image. So let's use the cached network image like before. Cool, and what are the other states we had? The uploading. For uploading, I'm just going to group that together with the loading. And then if we have an error, just print the error in the middle. And otherwise, just a sized box. Sweet, and if I save this, you can see there's a bunch of images that are loading. Awesome. So now we want to decorate up this post tile, and instead of just displaying an image, right? So we want to do that in the components, create a new component called post tile.dart. And so firstly, let's just grab that cached image. It's a good start. And as a requirement, I want to pass through a post. Right, so in our list view builder in the home page, we can return post tile and just give the post to that guy. Cool, and then we can do all the work here in terms of like liking, commenting, stuff like that, right? So we're gonna have a big column. And on top of the image, let's start off with the name. And in fact, let's put that in a row because we want the name. And we want a delete button. If you hover over the on pressed, it requires this sort of function. So let's actually require that at the top. And so if you come back to my post tile, you can see it's got the red squiggle because we have to fill out the on delete. So if the user wants to delete the post, then just pass through our delete post method. And let's see if this works. So if I just sign in, yay, looks like we can delete it. Okay, sweet. So now when I delete this, I want to actually show some options. And what I mean is I just want to have a confirmation box and say, delete post. And let's give them two actions. So a cancel button and a delete button. And so this way it feels more natural. Like if you have an image and you want to delete it, it'll ask for a confirmation. Sweet, now it's looking good. So let's come back to our post tile and continue decorating this up. So next to the name, I want to display a profile picture. And we got the current user. And also you only want to be able to delete the post that the user owns, right? You don't want them to delete other people's posts. So I'm going to keep track of that Boolean. And we have the post user. So in the initial state, let's just get those two people. Current user is from the auth qubit. And so once we know who the current logged in user is, then we should be able to calculate if this is the person's post or not. Cool. Now, if you come back to our profile qubit, you can see we have a fetch user profile, and this one doesn't return anything. It's just returning void. And this one is good for just loading up the user for profile pages. I'm just going to create another similar method to return the user profile with a given user ID, but one that's useful for loading many profiles, as opposed to just loading a single profile. So when you're looking at a profile page, you only need to load up one profile at a time. But when you're looking at a home page full of posts, then there's going to be multiple profiles that you would need to load. So that's what I'm doing here. I'm going to use a feature and actually return a profile user. And so why did I do that? Well, if you come back to my post tile, we can now say profile qubit and get the user profile with the user ID. And let's try to decorate this with a profile picture. So firstly, I'm just going to put a container around this with a nice secondary color. And if you look at this row, this is the top section of the post, right? Where we got the name and we have the delete button. But now I want to have a profile picture as well at the start. Okay, so we're going to use a cached network image again. Post user. And we're just going to need to check, make sure that there is a post user and that person has a profile image. Okay, so if they do, then we're going to return that image, and otherwise we're going to return just an icon. If I save this, then yay, our profile picture is being shown. Sweet. Now for the row, I'm just going to main access alignment to the start and then put a spacer in between to push that bin to the end. Cool, and I'm just going to add some padding and sized box just to space this out how I want. Cool, and finally in the delete button, remember we only want to show this if it's our own post. Right, so if I sign up with a different account, let's say Michael Jordan, then you can see that on Steve Jobs' posts that there is no delete button. So I can't delete it. But if I upload an image, then I have a delete button. So you can only delete your own posts. Nice. So now it's just the fun part. We can just decorate this up a bit. And one thing I don't like about icon button as a widget is for some reason it has so much extra space around it. Like you can see it's taking up extra space there. So instead I'm just going to use a gesture detector with the icon. It does the exact same thing, but I think it just physically fits better. Nice, so now we can upload a photo, we can delete the post. Let's have some buttons underneath this post to like, comment, and also a timestamp. Nice, there it is. So let's add some padding and just decorate this up a bit. And let's also have the count for the like and comments next to it. Okay, so let's start off with the likes. If you come back to our post.dart file, I'm going to include a list of strings for likes. And this will just store all the UIDs for the people that like this post. Which means you got the red squiggle here on the upload post because we got to fill out the like. So at the beginning, if we're creating a new post, it'll just be a blank list. And then in our post repository, we're going to have another method called toggle like post. And for the parameters, we just need to know the post ID of what we're liking and the user ID for the person who's liking this post. And finally, let's implement it in our Firebase post repo. So firstly, what we're going to do is just get the post document from Firestore. and just make sure it exists. And we're going to convert the post from JSON to a post object. And let's just check if the user has already liked this post. And depending on that, we can update the like list. So if the user has already liked this post, then we want to remove him. So effectively unliking the post, and vice versa. And then finally, we can update the post document with this new like list. Okay, let's come to our qubit and let's do the state management part. So if we toggle like post, then let's go to our post repo and try to do that. And if we have an error, then just emit the post error. By the way, I feel like the post tile should belong in the components for posts. And so in the post tile, let's have a section for likes. So if the user tapped the like button, then let's firstly grab the current like status. And then we can update the like. Right, which means we want the heart icon down here to be tappable. So let's wrap that in a gesture detector. And give it the toggle like post method. And then we can do some cool things here. So let's say that this post contains this current user's ID. And so if this person likes this post, then let's return a favorite icon. And then if not, then it's a favorite with a border. Looks like we have a bit of an error because the likes needs to be a list of strings. And if it's null, it could be just a list of, you can see dynamic. It could be anything in there, but we want string. Cool, and once we toggle the like post, let's fetch all the posts again. And let's test this out. So if I click on the heart, you can see we can now like it and unlike. Let's also try to update the count. And so you can see I'm liking and unliking. Now, one thing you noticed is when I toggle the like, the entire page is getting reloaded, right? So that's part of the state management. If I come back to my post qubit, when I fetch all the posts, you can see it's emitting these states like loading, and then it'll get the post and then say loaded. And so this loading state is what is giving the loading circle. Right, so what happens is when I tap on the like button, we are currently sending this information to Firestore, and then we are refetching that and displaying back into our app, which is why it's loading again and it takes a bit of time. So in order for us to create a more smooth and seamless experience for the user, we want to optimistically like and update the UI. So let me show you what I mean. We're going to set the state and do all the changes locally here. For example, if it's liked, then we can remove the like. We can add it to perform the like before we actually update the like in our Qubit, right? So when we actually do the liking in the Qubit and it sends the information to Firestore, we're going to catch an error. And if there's an error, then we can revert back to the original values. All right, so I'm just going to copy this and just do the reverse and undo the changes. Right, and then in the Qubit, in the toggle like method, after we do the like, instead of refetching the entire posts, I'm just going to get rid of that. And if I save this, you can see we are updating it locally. And so this is called optimistically updating the UI. So this will give the impression to the user that your app is very fast and responsive. So hopefully that made sense. If you have any questions, just leave a comment below because this is a very important concept. Now, one thing, can you see here, like when I like and unlike, it's changing the spacing. So it's kind of flickering, which I don't like. So what you can do is put the like stuff in a row. And fix the width. So for example, like 50. And so if I give it like a blue color, you can see how much space it's taking up. So just have an extra bit of space there because that way your other buttons aren't affected by the change. And just to make this a little bit better, let's also control the colors. Hell yeah, that's looking beautiful. Now let's try to implement the comments. So in our entity, I'm going to create a new comment class. So this comment's going to have an ID and the different IDs associated to it. So the post, the user, the username, the comment's text, and also just the timestamp. Cool, and similarly, like we did for all the other classes, I'm going to have a way to convert it to a JSON and vice versa. Cool, now if you come to our post class, now I'm going to add in a list of comments. And for this part, I'm just gonna keep our code clean and try to just prepare the comments. Because there's a couple conversions to do from our JSON, which is going to be a list of dynamic objects, but I want a list of comments. Nice. Now it looks like we have a red squiggle. Let's just go to this upload post page, because now when we create a new post, we just have to initialize the empty comments. So now let's go to our post repository and add in a new method. So add comment. And for the parameters, I just want to know the post ID that it's associated with and the comment that we're adding, which means we want to be able to delete the comment too. Cool. And let's implement this in our Firebase repository. So starting with the adding the comment, let's firstly just get the post document. And if it exists, then let's convert the JSON object to a post. Then we can just add it to the post comments. And let's update it in our Firestore as well. Deleting is going to be very similar, so I'm just going to copy all this. But except at this part, when we add a new comment, I'm going to remove. Cool, so we did the domain layer, we did the data layer, and now it's time for the presentation layer. So let's go to our post qubit. And remember, the qubit file here is for everything to do with state management. So firstly, if we add a comment, then let's just do that in our post repository. And then let's fetch all the posts again. If we have an error, then we're going to emit this error. Cool, and let's do something similar for deleting. Cool, so if you come back to our post tile, up here we've done some stuff for the liking, so let's have a section for the comments. So firstly, we're going to need a comment text controller to grab what the user typed. And then let's open a comment box so that the user can type something in. And then we'll have a couple actions. So a cancel button and a save button. Cool, and when we save it, we want to add the comment. So I'm just gonna separate out that method down here. So firstly, let's create the new comment. And let's add it using our Cupid. And let's just dispose of our controller. Cool, so if you scroll down, we want to be able to tap on this comment icon. So let's wrap this in a gesture detector. And then give it the open new comment box. Sweet, there it is, and we can start typing stuff in. And if I save it, then I think the comment is added, but we need to reflect this in the UI. So for example, if you look at this text widget, it's currently just showing the count of 0. So let's actually show this widget's post comments and the length. And if I save it, you can see it's got the 1 there. If I add another comment, then there's 2 comments. So I can see that it's actually working. So I'm just going to decorate this up first. Below this, we want to have a caption. So in a row, I'm going to put a username and then the text. And then below this, we're going to have the comment section. So I'm going to use a block builder here. And if the state is loaded, then let's get this individual post. And if we have some comments here, then let's say we can control how many comments we want to show. And for now, let's just show all the comments. And then we're going to use a list view builder. So we'll get the individual comment and we're going to return it as a comment tile UI. So that's if it's loaded. If it's loading, I'm just going to return a circular progress indicator. And also just handle the error message. Cool, and we're getting this kind of viewport error. And that's because this list view builder, we need to say shrink wrap is true. And also never scrollable. And if you save this, sweet, there's our comments. Beautiful. So now we can just start decorating this. And that's looking pretty good. Now, just to make this code a little bit more cleaner, I'm going to just separate this out into a separate component called comment tile. And let's actually add in a delete button. So I'm going to convert this to a stateful widget and try to keep track of the current user to see if this is the user's own post, because we only want to delete your own post. Cool, so I want to get some of the options again. So I'm just going to grab this dialog from here. And just switch it up a bit. And so in our delete button, we only want to show it if it's our own post. Nice, we can now delete our comments. Now I found a little bug, by the way. If I add a new comment, it looks like it's getting added as Michael Jordan. And then if I come down to the Steve Jobs post and I add a comment, it looks like the comment's being added as Steve Jobs. So something is a little wrong. So if we come back to our post tile, we need to make sure that the current user is the one that's adding the comment. So, and we open the comment box, and then when we add a comment, right, this is the problem. So for the user ID, we're going to just pass through the current user's ID. And same thing for the username. So if I just test this out and I add a comment, yep, looks like Michael Jordan, which is the current logged in user, as you can see in our profile. Nice. And you can see the little 3 dots here so that we can delete our own comment. Sweet. Now the next thing I want to do is I want to be able to tap on this top section where you got the user's name to be able to go to that user's profile. So if you come to the top of this column, you can see this is where I've got the top section. So I'm going to wrap this in a gesture detector. And when we tap on this, let's navigate to that person's profile page. And if I save this and I test this out, sweet, I can go to the profile page when I click on their username. Now, while we're on the profile page, I want to also display the posts for this particular person. So let's keep track of the post count, which will initialize it as 0. And then when I come down here, so you got the bio box and then we got the posts here. I want to display this list. So let's use a block builder and go to our post qubits. And so if it's loaded, then we will filter the posts by the user ID. Currently, if you look at the state and the posts from it, it'll display all of the posts in this entire app. So right now, let's just try to filter the posts for this particular user ID. And then let's update this post count and then return the list view. So we'll get the individual post and then return it as a post tile UI. Sweet, so that's if it's loaded. If it's loading, then we will show a loading circle. And also just handle the error as well. Sweet, now if you save this, it looks like we have a little error because this list view doesn't have a specified height. So what you can do is save physics and make this never scrollable, and the shrink wrap also set it to be true. So this will just be a static list. So if I just save this and test this out and I go to Michael Jordan, looks like the posts are showing, but we have a bit of an overflow problem. And that's because we are using a column. So just switch this to a list view and then it should be a nice scrollable page. Awesome. Now it looks like that email, we should just center it. Sick. And maybe put some gap in between. Now to level up our social media app, let's implement a concept of followers and following. So firstly, let's start with our domain layer, like always. And in the profile user, I'm going to add in these couple parameters here. So the followers and the following. In our data layer, we should have some red squiggles because we need to specify the followers. So let's come to this part where we have the user data and we're going to fetch the followers and the following from Firebase. Awesome, so now that we have the concept of followers and following, if you come to our profile repo, let's add in a couple of methods. So I want to now be able to toggle the follow. And what we need to know as a parameter is the current user ID and then the target user ID that the person is aiming to follow. And that's actually the only method we need. Then come to our data layer, and in the Firebase profile repo, let's implement the toggle follow in a try catch. So firstly, we're going to get the current user document. As well as the target user document. And let's just make sure both of them exist so that we can grab the data for each of them. And so once we have the current following, we need to check if the current user is already following the target user or not, right? So if they are already following, then unfollow the user. Otherwise, it will follow. So starting with the unfollow, what we need to do is in the following list, we're just going to remove this target UID and also remove us, so this current user ID, from the followers. So we need to update both lists. Okay, similarly, we're going to do that for the follow. And that's it. So now that we've done the domain layer and we've implemented the data layer, let's now come to our presentation layer and let's start with the profile qubit. So remember, the profile qubit is everything to do with the state management. So let's have the toggle follow method. And go to our repo, and we're going to try to toggle the follow. And once that's done, let's just refetch the user profile. Okay, if we have an error, just emit the error. Sweet, so if you come to a profile page, under the picture, let's have a follow button. Right, so I'm going to create this in a new component. So this is a follow or unfollow button. So this is a follow or unfollow button. And to use this widget, we need a function, right? So if I tap on the button, it will be like a toggle follow method that executes. And we also need a isFollowing boolean. Right, so for example, if it's false, then we will show the follow button. So let's create the stateless widget. And accept these two parameters. And now let's build the UI. So this will just be a simple material button where the text, just depending on if we're following or unfollowing, and same thing for the colors. If it's a follow button, let's make it blue. Cool, so in between here above the bio box is where I want the follow button. And so let's just execute nothing for now and say false. And you can see there it is. So it's looking pretty good. And let's just decorate this up by adding some padding. So some padding on the outside. We got the button, we got the color and the text. I'm going to add in the border radius. And I feel like we could use some padding on the inside. And let's switch up the text as well. Beautiful. So if you come back to our button, if I say false, it's going to show the follow button, and true will show the unfollow button, which is grayed out, as you can see. Now we're going to make sure we only want to show the follow button for when we're viewing other people's profile, right? Not when we're viewing our own profile. So I'm going to keep track of this boolean if we own this or not, right? Just by comparing the user IDs. And so let's just put it in an if statement. And you can see that's the same thing for the edit button. We only want to be able to edit the profile page if we own it, right? So you can see in the Steve Jobs, we can't see the edit button, but if I go to Michael Jordan, which is what I'm currently logged in as, you can see the edit button is there. We're going to do the same thing for the follow button. Only show it when it's not my own profile. So I can see it on Steve Jobs' page, but if I go to my page, Michael Jordan, then yep, there's no follow button anymore. Beautiful. Now coming back to the follow button, if we press it, we are currently executing nothing. So we want to do something, right? So let's do this up here. Have a little follow button pressed method. And so let's just have a look at the state of our qubit. And so if it's not loaded, then we're just going to return it and just execute nothing. We're just going to wait for it to load. Otherwise, if it's all loaded, then let's get the information for the profile user as well as the is following. And then we're going to just go to our profile qubit and toggle the follow. So we'll pass this method down to our follow button as well as the is following. So if I press follow, then it will load the profile again and looks like it's working. I can follow and unfollow. Now one thing is similar to how we did the likes. You can see it's got that loading screen because it's got that delay because it needs to talk to our database and then come back, which takes a bit of time. So what we can do, just to give a good user experience, I'm going to optimistically update the UI, similar to what we did for the like count. If you look at this in between here, we're going to just set the state. And again, just depending on if we're following the current user or not. So we'll make the changes locally before performing the actual toggle in the qubit. Now, if there's an error in the database, then we're going to catch this error and revert the changes. This way, it'll update and reflect the UI instantly and handle all the tasks in the backend, which means in our profile qubit, we don't need to do this refetching, and that's what's causing the entire load. So if I save this and I go to Steve Jobs, you can see I can unfollow and follow, and it feels instantaneous. Beautiful. Sweet. Now the next part now is we want to display the number of followers. So I'm going to have something called profile stats. And this will be displayed on all the profile pages, where we display the number of posts, followers, and following, just like how we see on other social media platforms. So let's create this stateless widget and require these parameters. And when we build the UI, this will just be in a nice row for the posts, followers, and following. And each of these will be a column where we're just displaying the counts. Let's just put in 0 for now. Sweet, so if you save it, you can see like there it is. So now I'm just going to decorate this up a little bit. Center it in the middle. And let's space this out. And just decorate it. Nice, that's looking pretty good. So now we've got the UI down. If you come back to the profile stats, we're actually just giving it zeros. So now we can actually give it this user's followers length and following length. And if I follow, unfollow, you can see the profile stats there is getting updated. Now the next thing I want to do is I want to be able to tap on these profile stats and actually see in a list who their followers and following are. Alright, so I'm going to create a new page just called follower page. And this page will display a tab bar to show the list of followers and following. So let's accept them and require them as a parameter. And we're going to use a big tab controller. And for the length, we just want 2. And for the child, this is where we can just give the scaffold. And so I'm going to put the tab bar at the bottom of the app bar. And then in the body is where we need to create the tab bar view. So before I code this up any further, let's come back to our profile stats and just wrap it in a gesture detector. And so if you tap on this, then we need to require this sort of function. And what I want to pass through on this onTap function is just to navigate to that follower page. And for now, let's just put in a blank list. Sweet, so if I save this and I click on those stats, then we can go to this new page and now we can see a nice tab bar. Awesome, which means coming back to the follower page, let's build out the user list, given a list of profile UIDs. So if it's empty, then I'm just going to display an empty message. Otherwise, we're going to use a big list. So we'll get the each UID from the big list. And we're going to use a future builder so that we can get the user profile for each of these UIDs. Right, and we're going to do the usual like loaded, loading, as well as any error handling. Sweet, and then in the tab bar view, let's just bring in the build user list widgets for the followers and following. And now in the follower page, instead of giving a blank list, let's actually give the users followers and following. All right, let me save this and restart it. Hey, Michael Jordan, if I click on it and I go to following, yay, we can see Steve Jobs is following us. Beautiful. So now that that's working, I'm just going to decorate this up, make it look a little nicer. And even this list tile displaying the user, I'm going to separate this component out. And all we need for a user tile is just to know the user. We'll just have the title and the subtitle for the email. So if I come back over here, let's return a user tile. And if I save it, yep, that's what it looks like. So now we can just start decorating this up. It's looking good. Let's have a trailing icon. As well as a leading icon. And the most important thing I want to do here is the on tap. So if you tap on this user tile, then what I want to do is I just want to go to the profile page for this user. Nice. If I save this, go to the followers or following, and I can click on the name and go to the profile. Awesome. Next, let's implement a new feature for the search. So starting with the domain layer, let's have a search repo. And so for the repository, we just want to have the method, just one method, to search users with a given query. And let's implement this in our data layer. So Firebase search repo implements the search repository. And let's fill out this method. So in a try catch, let's try to go to our collection of users. And what we're going to do is we're going to find the users where the name is greater than or equal to our query. And it's also less than or equal to our query. So if you're not sure what this UF8FF means, it's simply just used here to expand the search range to include all the possible values that start with the same prefix as the query. So you can look into that with a bit more detail if you like, but then we can just get this result and throw any exceptions if there are errors. And so with this result, we're going to map each of these documents. And convert it from the JSON to a profile user. And we can return this using a nice list. Cool, so now it's time for the presentation layer. And let's start with the qubits. So firstly, the search states. Similar to what we had before, we're going to have the initial, loading, and loaded. And if it's loaded, then we're going to have those users. So let's grab that. And same thing for the error. We can store the message. So these are the different possible states we can have. Let's now code up the search qubit. And we're going to require the search repository like usual. And we just need to fill out this search users method. And again, remember, everything in this qubit has to do with the state management. So firstly, if the query is empty, then I'm just going to emit the initial state. Otherwise, we can try, and then we can emit the loading state. Then go to our search repository and try to search the users with this query. And then if that's all successfully done, we can emit the loaded state and load up the users. And also just handle the error state as well. Cool, which means finally, let's create the page for the search. So let's just start off with a scaffold and an app bar. And before we code up this page any further, if you come to my drawer, you can see we got the search tile. So now we can tap on this to go to the search page. Awesome, so if I save this and I go to the menu drawer and I click on this, I can now go to the search page. Cool, so we can just start decorating this up here. So we got the scaffold, the app bar, and in the title, let's have the text field. Right, so you can start typing stuff in there, which means we're going to need a text controller to access what the user typed. Let's also grab our search qubit. And I'm going to implement a method here for onSearchChanged. So our query is going to be just whatever's in that controller. And we're going to go to our search qubit to try to search these users. Now, one important thing we need to do is in the initial state, if you go to the search controller, we can add a listener and then pass through the onSearchChanged. So what this does is the listener will listen for each keystroke, and basically it will perform the search each time we type a character. Right, and then let's just do the usual and dispose of the controller. And finally, down in the UI, we can pass through the controller to the text field. And let's just have some decoration and say like search users in the hint. And then finally in the body, we're going to have the search results, which we're going to use a BLoC builder. And set up the different cases. So we've got the loaded, loading, error, and just the default. So if it's loaded, then we could potentially have no users. So if it's empty, then I'm just going to return and say it's no user found. And then if we do have users, then let's return it as a list view. And then if it's loading, I'm just going to show a circular progress indicator. And just handle the error states as well. And it looks like we have a search qubit, but we didn't provide it in our app. So if you come back to the app.dart, we've got all the repositories here. So let's get the Firebase search repository that we implemented. And also provide our qubit as well. Sweet, so if you save this and I run it again, let's go to our search page, and if I start typing stuff in, say like capital M, you can see Michael Jordan is there, and we can click on it and go to Michael Jordan's page. That's the search function done. Now let's go to our settings page, and I want to have the dark mode for the themes. So currently we just have the light mode. Let's also do a dark mode as well. And you can pick whatever colors you want, but you can also copy the ones that I've chosen. So the way I like to lay this out is we've got just different shades of gray. Okay, so like very dark, slightly dark, and just different variations of that. So like I said, you can just copy these colors. I'm going to specify the surface. And you can see you can hover over this color to just literally pick whatever color you want. Primary, secondary, tertiary, and inverse primary. And also let's specify the background color. Cool, so that's our dark mode. Let's create a new file here called theme qubit so that we can switch between the two. And initially we're just going to say is dark mode is false. So it should be light mode at the beginning. Let's create the dark mode getter. And most importantly, the toggle theme. So we're just going to flip this around. And then we can emit the correct theme. Awesome. So if you come back to our app.dart, let's also bring in and provide the theme qubit. So if you look at the material app currently, we're just specifying the theme to be light mode, right? Let's just have a look at what dark mode looks like. That's looking pretty sick. Now what I want to do is I want the user to be able to go to the settings page and control this. Right, so this material app, I want you to wrap it in a block builder where we provide the theme. And if you hover over this state, you can see it's the theme data. So this, I'm actually just going to rename it to say current theme because that's what it precisely is. And we can pass the current theme to our theme field here. Beautiful. So let's just real quick create a settings feature. And what I want here is mainly the page. And on this page, you can do multiple things, right? Like the settings for the app. So I'm going to implement the dark mode here, but later we could do blocked users, account settings, and various stuff like that. So when we build the UI in the settings page, let's grab the theme qubit. And let's also just check if we're in dark mode or not. And in the body, we're going to put in a list tile for the dark mode. And for the trailing, I'm going to use a switch. Specifically, I'm going to use a Cupertino switch, which is like the Apple style. So we can give it the value and the onChanged method. Beautiful. So if you come back to our drawer, in the settings tile now, if I click on this, let's navigate to the settings page. And if I save this, I can go to the drawer, go to the settings page, and there's the switch. And it looks like I can now switch to dark mode and vice versa. Cool, so if you look at the simulator, so I've been using the iPhone right now, but I want this to work on not just iPhone and Android, but also the web. So if you click on the current device, I'm going to click on Chrome and see how this performs on the web. Nice, there it is. And you can see that it's so stretched out, obviously, because the window size can change. So we're gonna have to adjust for that in just a second. But this is pretty cool. So let's try to sign in. And it looks like the app's working, but the images are not getting loaded. So what you want to do for that is, instead of just running the debug with the Chrome like usual, I want you to add on this tag web renderer HTML. And so if you run this and I try again, we should be able to see those images now. And everything's working beautifully. Awesome. Now the one adjustment I want to make is when this stretches out, I want to be able to be responsive and kind of handle different screen sizes. So let's create a new folder here called responsive. And one easy way to handle this is I'm going to create a constrained scaffold. And so this is just a normal scaffold, but the width is going to be constrained so that it behaves consistently on larger screens. So what I mean is, this is just going to be a stateless widget where we pass through the body, the app bar, and the drawer. So those are the main features in the scaffold. And so when we return this, it will be the scaffold with all of those components. But for the body, I'm going to put it in a constrained box where we specify the max width to be 430. So I chose 430 because 430 pixels is the kind of average width of most mobile phones. So if it's any bigger than that, then we're just going to constrain it. Right, so what we need to do is, if you come back to all of the presentation layer and go to the pages, anytime we have a scaffold in the pages, I'm just going to replace it with a constrained scaffold. So in the login page, let's change this to constrained scaffold. Same as the register page. Same as the home page. Upload post page. Edit post page. The follower page. And the profile page. Search page. Settings page. And that should be it. So you can see, like, it really helps the fact that we have our code organized nicely in good folders. So now let's try this again. I'm going to run the Chrome on the web. And you can see, yeah, so our window is so wide, but our app is constrained to be a certain width. So even if I sign in, you can see it'll just behave almost like a mobile inside. Cool, so it's looking pretty good on the web. Now I'm going to focus on deploying it and hosting this app on the web so you can just easily share this link around and get users to try out your app. So firstly, what you need to do is open up your terminal and we're going to need to type Flutter build web, and let's put in that web renderer tag, HTML. And then let's type in the Firebase login, so make sure you're logged in with the email. And then Firebase init. And then just go down to the hosting. What do you want to use as your public directory? Build/web. Configure as a single page app? Yes. Set up automatic builds? No. Do you want to overwrite this? No. And Firebase initialization complete. Now we can just say Firebase deploy. Nice. Deploy complete. So you can see the hosting URL. If you go to this link, you should be able to have your app hosted on the web. Nice. And that is amazing, which means you can just share this link around to different people and they can easily access your app. So that's one thing about apps in the App Store, where obviously if they like your app, you can direct them to go download your app from the App Store. But having a web app deployed like this, I feel like is really useful as well. And it's really easy and quick. Cool. Now, if you look at this link, obviously it doesn't look the cleanest, right? Social app tutorial -81 CEA web app. What you can do later is when you're serious about your app, you can purchase a domain name of your liking. And then if you go to your Firebase console in the hosting, you can see there's our app with the domain name with this one. And if you look here, you can actually add a custom domain and you can insert the one that you have, right? So something like instagram.app or whatever your URL domain name that you own. So hopefully this gives you a very good foundation for you to build out your app as well as deploy it so that your users can try it out. And that's it. If you made it to the end, amazing work. You're already ahead of most people. Just make sure to comment a purple heart emoji so that I know who actually watched the entire video. If you have any questions, just leave a comment below and I'll try to help you out. But thanks for watching and I wish you all the best on your coding journey.